properly.
Hey, my name is Bita. I am living here in Cascais, Portugal, and we left Toronto, Canada about 5 months ago.
Awesome. And Bita, you're a mom of 3 kids. I met you in Toronto years ago, and I wanted to dive in today and hear you share your story, your why around making a jump with your family with 3 kids from Toronto, which was busy and amazing. You had a life there, or you have a life there, and you made a decision to jump and change your setting, your schooling. What prompted this? Is this something that was like a spur of the moment, or did it come kind of down the pike for a while?
So I think the seed was planted many years ago. My eldest, who is now 11, when he was about 5 or 6 years old, I just had this really strong feeling that before he became a teenager, we needed to expose him to other. He needed to be able to see that the life that he was living in Toronto, although amazing in so many ways, wasn't the only way to live.
Mm. And when you thought of that, did you begin to think of where you would like him to land, or what could be another option for showing him the world?
I think originally when I had the master plan in mind, I thought for sure somewhere in Asia, as far away from Canada as possible in terms of cultural norms, and just different. I fantasized about places like Bali, or Thailand, but really what resonated with me was somewhere like Japan.
Why Japan?
I think that Japan represented to me something that was lost in my family lineage from my generation to my children's. And both of my parents being of Iranian heritage, we were brought up with very strong what would have been cultural norms for us. So a certain amount of discipline and respect and more, traditional ways of going about things that are more typical in Eastern cultures. And
okay,
I had that from my
parents. Japan connection.
Yeah. And bringing up my children, I realized that they were having a totally different experience of what that was or what it meant or how it felt than what my experience was growing up. And I felt like Japan had something for all of us, and really is so steeped in things like discipline and honor, respect, how, multi-generations are treated and integrated into the family, which was also something that's very big in our culture.
And so you're not in Japan, are you?
We never made it to
land in Japan. How did you pick Portugal, Japan? How did you pick Portugal?
Totally different, opposite. So the wonderful thing called COVID happened. And when we decided to make the jump, this would have been January 2022. Japan was still not giving visas to tourists. And because we would not have been moving to Japan for work reasons, and we're not Japanese citizens, the likelihood of that transitioning happening was pretty slim. So we thought, what would be another type of experience that children can have? Another thing that was big on our list is that our children don't really know what the experience of a monoculture is. And I thought that that's also an interesting aspect there, because growing up in Toronto, there is such a accepting of diversity and cultures and all of these beautiful things that Torontonians bring to our Toronto culture, but that is very unique. And in some ways, I wanted to show my children how incredibly lucky they are, and at the same time have them experience the perks of a monoculture. and what that looks like. So we thought Europe would be a really great place. Where in Europe, and a lot of our decision making had to factor in my husband, who's still going back and forth for work. So we at first thought Switzerland is really great. During COVID, they had really fantastic, comparatively to the rest of the world, practices with children and masking and allowing them to be normal children through the COVID experience, I will call it. And so we thought that was a really great option, but I kind of backpedaled and said, that is really replicating Canada or Toronto in our experience there in many ways in terms of climate. Something that's really attractive to both my husband and I are Mediterranean or Latin cultures, where it's more of a heart culture. And we thought that would have been a really fantastic fit for both us and an experience for our children, which so far it has been.
So much intention. You've thought it through in such a beautiful way, and this is something I'm noting.
But at the same time, I think there was a lot of sorry about that. There was a lot of spontaneity in the details. So we had sent the intention, but at first we thought Lisbon. Once we got to Lisbon, we thought, well, we're taking our children from one urban environment to another. Why don't we let them have a different experience? And so we ended up finding a fantastic school in Cascais. There's a lot of international schools here. They have a growing international community.
And for those who don't know Cascais, Lisbon is the sort of city hub of Portugal. Tell us a little bit about Cascais. What does it have to offer? Where is it in Portugal?
Just west of Lisbon, about half an hour, 40 minutes. And my husband made a very funny joke when I first said, let's go here instead of staying in Lisbon. Excuse me. And he said, you want to move to Oakville comparatively to Toronto? And I'm like, we're not moving to Oakville. We're moving to Malibu of Los Angeles. Let's draw those parallels. And so, both Oakville and Malibu provide more spaciousness. It's a little bit of a different landscape. It's by the water, which Lisbon is also, but we're very close to many hiking trails. One thing that we didn't expect here is what a horse culture there is. So there's a lot of options for horseback riding and being in nature. Yeah, I think within...
And surfing. I don't know if you've gotten into surfing.
Yes, hence the head cold currently. The water's cold here. Okay. But yes, the surfing also. And it's just a very different lifestyle experience compared to what they have in Toronto, which is also amazing, but very different.
Bita, I think when people hear you speak about your jump and your intention and just this decision, often what comes up in people's head is, I can't do that. I can't make this kind of jump or change. Did you have any second thoughts or any concerns in your head of this is a great idea, but did any of that come up when you were gearing up for this jump?
I have to say no. I think I was so ready to make this jump that there was always the possibility of going back. I think my husband had all of those kind of stoppers in place. I said, we should do this for 2 years. That was my original, intent. And he said, let's start with 4 months. We're going to do a term abroad. And if it doesn't work, we can come back by Christmas. And I think just spacing it out for himself in his mind that way, it allowed him to be able to reverse if needed. I think just with having kids in school, there is this commitment for the school year at least. And so in our heads, we knew, I knew at least, if this is a really horrible experience, then we're back by summer. There's also at least one flight flying to Toronto every day from Lisbon. So it's not so hard to get back home.
You're not trapped. You are not trapped.
We're not trapped.
Yeah. And what about the kids? Were they, how did you present it to them and how did they take it in? Because I've done this with my kids as well. And I'm curious to hear what your kids said when you said, guess what? We're moving to.
So, I'll give the example of my eldest because he was the most apprehensive. He had gone to the same school for 8 years. He had been in class with the same children. There was one class per grade. So he had pretty much been in class with the same children of 20 for 8 years. So that was a really big jump for him. That was really pulling him out of his comfort zone. And, there were some compromises that had to be made. Number one, the dog had to come with us because if she wasn't coming, he wasn't coming. And he made that very clear. So we said, okay.
Right.
So he had a little bit of that security with him. But I think the big thing for him was that we put him in an international summer camp in July. And he traveled to Austria with 3 other children, the same age of him, 11. And they represented Canada, and they met with 11 other delegations from around the world. And he was gone for about 3.5 weeks. And when he came back, he said, Mom, without fail, that was the best experience of my life. It was the first time I was actually able to just be me. And I said, can you explain that a little bit more? And he said, well, Mom, everyone was so different because they were from different countries that I didn't have to be a certain way. There was no certain way of normal. And I said, well, that's really fantastic that you experienced that before our little, travel experiment. But that to him really opened the pathway it opened his heart to the possibility of what this experience might be. And I think putting him in an international school was definitely the right step. There's about 30 to 40% of the children who are Portuguese or Brazilian. And then the other 60, 70% are from all over the world. So he's learning a lot about South Africa. He's learning a lot about England. He's learning a lot about all of these children and what their cultural norms are and why they are here. He's learning a lot about Russia and Ukraine through the Russian and Ukrainian children.
Directly, not just from our news.
100%. And that to me is really so experience, like such a great experience for all of them, not just him. So
awareness building, like firsthand.
Yeah.
Wow. And your other 2 children, have there ever been points in which you have felt maybe this wasn't the right decision, or all along have you felt like, yeah, my gut keeps checking out. This is a really great move for all of us.
I think we made possibly one, I wouldn't call it a mistake. It was an experiment, and there's no mistakes in experiments. We put our youngest in Portuguese bilingual. And I think having had no previous exposure to the language of Portuguese and being thrown into it when his siblings had not, I saw that it was being at school was much more of a struggle for him. And so even though the 3 of them were at the same school, I think that was really difficult for him. So we switched him to the international stream this January, and he's much happier. He's no longer boycotting school. So I think it's
which kids boycott school being in the same spot as well. So I guess you see different children in the same family respond in different ways. And
exactly. And I think, having said, are there points where I feel like my 11-year-old was definitely ready for the move? I think emotionally it has been harder on the 5-year-old. I think just being pulled out of his normal, I think he asks for grandparents more and wants to see family more.
Right.
Whereas the other 2 had their cup filled for a few more years. So they don't feel that age and stage.
And if I could, just end on the note of when people make a jump as a family, they're looking for certain things. And I've heard they're looking for connection. They're looking for new bonds, new zones in which you can break out of comfort and explore and learn. What do you hope that you'll get from this time away from Toronto? And what do you already see happening with your kids?
I feel like I can talk about this one for hours. It in many ways was a great reset. I feel like definitely for myself, I'm sitting in front of a blank canvas, and, having grown up in Toronto, it's such a completely different feeling of being able to completely reinvent yourself, with the knowledge and experience of your past in a way that, is relevant and gratifying, may I say, in my 40s. So it's a completely different experience for me, and how I translate that to my children and how they can do that for themselves is also, for the youngest, it doesn't apply so much. The 7-year-old's just trying to find her bearings and her place. But I really see that also with the 11-year-old that, having garnered the experience of his summer camp, he can really reinvent himself the way that speaks to him. Even though he's still going through the same tween challenges that one may experience regardless of where they are, he has the opportunity to experience himself, and that in a different way.
That's beautiful. And I remember you saying as well, the rhythm of your family's changed, even from like the space that you're in and the place you're renting is different from where you live in Toronto, and the way you interact, even in your house, in your home. That was something we noticed when we traveled with our kids, that our family rhythm and our connections would often be informed by the spaces that we inhabit. And that has such a huge impact, as well as the culture and the influences on the outside. But just as a family, your rhythm changes.
It's really funny because I don't know when I had that conversation with you, but I remember so it's evolved since then. And so my kids each had their own bedroom, and the eldest was on the main floor by himself. And then I think when I spoke with you, he had opted to move in with his little brother upstairs. So since our conversation, they're now all three of them sharing a room. And so I have these empty bedrooms, and I'm thinking I actually don't need all this space because they're much happier together. Now it's hit or miss at bedtime, but overall I think everyone's happier.
Amazing. So we'll all just come and inhabit those bedrooms. We're coming to Portugal.
There's
to be
so
with
much
you, Bita.
space. There's so much space.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing, and I can't wait to check in again at the end of the year and see how it's going. Thank you for sharing your experience, and I look forward to other parents hearing and being inspired.
It's been a fantastic experience, and I really hope that anyone who's on the fence makes the jump. You won't regret it.
You won't regret it. Thanks, Bita.